The People's Republic of China is a massive economic success story. Following the reform movement in the late 1970s, China's economic growth and development had exploded. With a GDP of $13.6 trillion, a GNI per capita of $9,470, and a Gini index score of 42.2, China's success story must have completely transformed the lives of many Chinese. Well, that's not quite true. As anyone who lives in a large country can attest, GDP, GNI per capita, and other economic measurements on the macro scale do not effectively represent a country, as poverty, benefit, and opportunities change depending on the location, climate, governmental policies, and other factors which affect micro-local economic development. Well, China is no different. Today, we'll be exploring the Chinese province of Fujian, its major port city of Xiamen, and the special economic zones as it relates to uneven economic development. But before we go into it, a bit of a disclaimer first. This video, obviously, contains both Mandarin and Cantonese pronunciations. Do go easy in the comments below. As you can see, I'm not Han Chinese, nor do I speak Mandarin or Cantonese. I will do my best, I promise. Furthermore, this video is created for a class at a university. References can be found in the description below for those grading me or for those seeking some additional reading. And with that said, let's get started. Before we dive into the Fujian province, we should address what is uneven economic development. Uneven economic development occurs as persistent differences in the levels and rates of economic development between different sectors of the economy, which, if you think about it, is kind of intrinsic to the name, which makes this topic extremely complicated. Each sector of the economy can be unevenly developed, with each sector possessing different causes, problems, and solutions depending on geography, culture, government, political relations, and other circumstantial mitigating factors. Possibly too complicated for a 15-minute video, but we'll find out. If that's left unchecked, uneven economic development can have long-lasting political ramifications. The first one is the ethical one. Absent solvency, a society will always be forced to confront the contradictions between ethically motivated efforts to establish socioeconomic parity and the economic advantages of allowing inequality to increase. Thus, this creates a cycle of chronic poverty. The second, significant disparities in economic development will always have an adverse effect on the political stability of a nation. Since the establishment of political society, dating back farther than Aristotle, real and perceived inequalities have given rise to conflicts. Just as economic conflicts harm social stability between ethnic groups, the same effect exists for interregional conflicts within a society. The most effective way to address these interregional disparities is to locate the source of inequalities by observing the overall growth of the national economy and the dynamics of regional growth. Given how complex the effects of uneven development have on the national economy, we will explore the effects on the Fujian province, and in particular the disparity between the major port cities and the interior regions within the province. But before we can do that, we have to dive into the historical context of how Fujian province has developed over the years, as it plays a very key role in the understanding of its current development. Fujian province has always been a major maritime supplier for China. In the pre-modern period of China's history, it serves as a significant area of trade and housed major Chinese maritime ports. Upon the arrival of European powers and their dominance following the Opium Wars, two cities were established in the region as treaty ports, which ensured European access to Chinese goods and allowed Western interests access to the city, one of them being the city of Xiamen. From here, the rise of the coastal interior developmental divide following the arrival of European direct investments, it became obvious. However, economic development starting from the fall of the Qin dynasty was near non-existent. The Republican period, starting from 1912, saw a weak government lacking legitimacy and internal conflicts fueling a warlord era within the Fujian province. In the Second World War, brutal Japanese invasion, and the Chinese Civil War, it saw most of the economic development within the region completely lost. Following the establishment of the People's Republic of China in 1949 and 3 decades later, the Fujian province was not developed at all. This was due, of course, to the external threats, as the communist government perceived an attack from the United States and Taiwan from the Taiwan Strait. Its only development was being transformed into a military fortress ready to respond to a capitalist attack at a moment's notice. Bear in mind that the Fujian province itself sits directly across from Taiwan. Fujian's economic development, and really that of all of China, it can be attributed to the radical initiatives regarding China's external economic relations. Fujian's coastal city of Xiamen was established as a special economic zone, which allowed foreign direct investment to increase technological access, promote exports, and stimulate domestic economies. Since then, Xiamen's development has grown exponentially, solely based on foreign direct investment. The impact of this, well, it was clearly seen. In 1980, Xiamen's GDP was only 64 million RMB, with exports at 140 million US dollars. In 1997, only 20 years after the reform era, Xiamen's GDP exploded, reaching 37 billion RMB, with exports topping out at 4.2 billion US dollars, which is a 47-fold increase in GDP. Such growth is largely attributed to foreign invested enterprise, as they contributed nearly 40% of the province's exports, many of these investments coming from Taiwanese companies at 35% of total foreign direct investment. But how did such an extraordinary explosion in growth occur? Well, of course, there are two primary factors. First and foremost, the city enjoyed extreme special policy privileges which gave it greater influence over provincial governments and the ability to guide policy on international trade with foreign powers, principles on foreign investment and loans, state intervention and support when expanding on specific market forces, and Xiamen's city government gave, foreign investors influence in determining taxation, customs, and land use rights. The second is the port city's proximity to Taiwan, allowing the city and the province itself to be central in cross-strait relations. Trade integration became an additional measure in facilitating reunification by encouraging closer economic bonds between the mainland and Beijing's rogue province. As I mentioned before, nearly 35% of foreign direct investment, it came from Taiwanese businessmen looking for investment opportunities. It's not a coincidence that many Taiwanese are themselves former residents of Fujian. The use of special economic zones have been so successful that Beijing extended the coverage of Xiamen zone and opened 14 more in other coastal cities, resulting in a surge of foreign direct investment. However, a program that encourages that much growth so quickly does bring other problems along with it. Currently, with the benefit of FDI as being central to Chinese economic growth both within the Fujian province and the country as a whole, there is one major problem: regional provincial inequality caused by uneven investment and development. This is caused by the nature of these special economic zones, in which foreign investment is given special privileges regarding taxation and influence depending on some specific set of requirements. However, these zones are limited in size and scope. While they may have expanded in size covers throughout the coastal regions, they have not expanded into the interior of the provinces. The result, foreign direct investment cannot directly invest into regions outside of the special economic zones. Given that China's overall economic growth and the southern China's sub-regional economies are based nearly solely on foreign direct investment, it does prevent even the distribution of benefits that come with an increase in exports. An example of this problem comes by just looking at GDP growth measured at the county level within the Fujian province in 1996 at the height of the special economic zone's successes. County GDP per capita ranged from less than 3,450 RMB in the majority of the still poorest counties to 37,800 RMB in the richest provinces. The richest provinces benefited from the zone's growth were those directly within the zones and received the direct foreign direct investment. Those within the supply line and shipping goods via the export ports also received some of the benefits. If a set of goods was not sold on international trade or the county did not have access to the port cities within the zones, either due to underdeveloped infrastructure or purposeful political policies would prevent such engagement, the county's ability to reduce wealth inequality it may be near impossible. Fujian has implemented a number of policies intended to redistribute the income towards the poor areas and prevent chronic poverty. Poor counties have benefited from the post-Mao boom aided by these zones, but have they not been shared proportionally? Recent anti-poverty initiatives have not been sufficient to override the factors and making the increase in economic disparities. At some point, further widening of the gaps of living standards, say between the extremely rich county city of Xiamen and, the poverty-stricken county of Guanxi, it may be a serious source of contention. Bear in mind, though, that these counties are only 50 kilometers away. The policies that are proposed ought to focus on narrowing interregional relative disparities in Fujian, as reducing poverty will not address the uneven economic development, given that poor provinces have also had a share in the growth. So what can the Chinese government do at the national level, or even within Fujian itself, to implement and reduce the effects of uneven economic development and potential political instability within the region? First and foremost, any policies proposed cannot be anti-poverty. Given that the interregional disparities are created by these zones, addressing poverty will only mediate the symptoms of the problem, rather than address the problem itself. Any proposal would have to be central to these special economic zones. There are three different policy solutions for which I'm proposing for which the government could choose to implement. The first, maintain the special economic zones in size and scope and invest resources in infrastructure, raw material extractions, manufacturing, and agriculture to allow for different counties better access to port cities and the ability to sell goods. This would be the most practical solution, but also the most expensive, as integrating those poorer counties into the supply chain, that would require resources beyond the provincial governments. This is also the solution with the longest time frame, which may not be useful if political instability has already occurred. The second, expand the special economic zones to encompass the entirety of Fujian province. This would allow for foreign direct investment to reach other areas of the province at the willingness of foreign invested enterprises. However, this policy may not be effective to solve for interregional disparities and inequalities, as these enterprises are driven by return on investments and therefore may not be focused on areas of necessities. However, this may or may not be true, given how many of these companies are Taiwanese in nature and have origins and ties in the Fujian province. The third, remove the special economic zone in its entirety and return to import subsidization economic policies before the reform era. Such a program may be theoretically possible as China moves into a technologically based economy following other developed nations, as a means to both have import subsidization policies while not harming the economy solely based on foreign direct investment. But given that China still heavily relies on its manufacturing and export central economy, this may not be the most feasible solvency in the status quo, possibly in the future as China becomes more and more technologically based. Furthermore, political ramifications and the damage to China's international soft power, well, it may negate those benefits. Well, there you have it, an analysis of the special economic zones within the Fujian province and the problems of uneven economic development. Do you agree with these solutions? What solutions would you propose to the Chinese government to remedy the uneven economic development within the Fujian province as a whole? Or in China as a whole? Leave a comment below. If you enjoyed this video, do give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time.